Okay, good afternoon, 1 minute afternoon. We'll start the meeting. I'm going to chair the meeting today. Joe Buscaino is on the line with us. Joe, are you on the line? Maybe he's muted. Anyway, he's joining us by phone but cannot chair today as he's probably in a distant place where we can't post the agenda. So, and Lisa Bartlett will not join us. So we have our newest member, Carlos Rodriguez, with us this morning.
Hello, everyone.
Well, afternoon. It's early afternoon. So we'll get going on this meeting. We have quite a few things to go over. First item is execute contracts to replace heavy-duty diesel trucks with near-zero emissions natural gas trucks. And we have Ms. Fan Xu. Did I say it right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Fan Xu, and I'm an air quality specialist in the Technology Advancement Office. The items that I'm going to present today is to seek approval to execute contracts for replacement of heavy-duty diesel trucks with near-zero emission natural gas trucks using returned CEC funds. Back in October 2018, the board approved awards for 140 truck replacement projects, and those are to expand the deployment of near-zero emission natural gas trucks. Those projects are funded with CEC and local match funds, totaling $14 million. And the board also approved to recognize those funds in the Community Air Protection Fund, Fund 77. Since the awards, 7 fleets have declined their awards for various reasons. For example, one fleet has to downgrade their fleet size due to financial reasons. They have to drop about half of their awarded trucks. And those changes has resulted turnback funds of $3.9 million, and they are now available for other eligible projects. In terms of eligibility, in addition to the requirements of Proposition 1B program, replacement trucks also need to be near-zero emission natural gas trucks. And currently, we have Proposition 1B solicitation going on, and we have received a lot of applications. A great portion of those applications are for near-zero emission natural gas trucks. So those can be used to substitute the canceled trucks. With that, the staff have go down the list of the applications received from the solicitation and identify the 2 large eligible fleets. So the staff would like to propose to fund 39 trucks from those 2 fleets using the turnback funds. And in addition, in the event that additional trucks identified for the CEC funds are canceled in the future, the staff would like to propose to fund the other eligible projects from the Proposition 1B solicitation using the turnback funds until all the funds are exhausted. In summary, the recommended actions are to execute contracts with the 2 fleets I mentioned earlier, National Ready Mix Concrete Company and Pacific Green Trucking, for $2.9 million and $1 million, respectively, from Fund 77, and to authorize the executive officer, in case of additional turnback funds, to execute additional contracts for the eligible projects received from the recent Proposition 1B solicitation until all the funds are exhausted. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do you have any questions? Anybody? Carlos, you're the only one here.
You knew, was there a bid process that you went through? Can you just outline that for me briefly?
So the Prop 1B is a goods movement truck program. It was a $1 billion authorization by the voters about 6 years ago. And so they divided it into different funding corridors throughout the state. South Coast is one of the major corridors. We got about $250 million, sorry, of the Prop 1B fund. No, 44%, sorry. So almost half of those funds. And then they gave it to us in chunks. This was the last year that we did this, last year was the last year of the official solicitations for Prop 1B. And we were oversubscribed, and so we went after CEC funding, which is what this project was for. And so all the applications that we had for the Prop 1B, we dedicated to this funding source. So there was an open solicitation, the projects were ranked, right? And then they were awarded. But since it was kind of an older list, some of these fleets no longer are willing to accept the funds, and so we're just coming to you saying, we found, what we did is we opened up another Prop 1B eligibility list, and that's actually still open. And fleets are, this renewed list, fleets are applying to for this kind of remainder of the funds. So we found these two fleets off of that new renewed solicitation list.
So it'll be 29 and 10 trucks respectively.
That's correct.
And how soon would they be in use?
It takes about 4 months to 6 months probably to
6
do the
months
order.
for delivery, yeah.
Okay. Would there be a replacement of current fleet?
Yeah, they have to scrap, that's part of the program.
Okay.
So they take their older diesel truck, scrap it, and then they are awarded this newer. And in our solicitation, it's a new near zero natural gas truck, so 90% cleaner than the existing standard.
None of you could explain how on most of these incentive programs, how is it that we're ensured that we're actually getting those NOx emission reductions?
Yeah, so it's a pretty rigorous program, and it's overseen by ARB, but they require us to actually document the old truck, the VIN number, that it's actually scrapped. They put a hole in the middle of the engine, and so we have to document pre-order, order, and then we document also the VIN number of the new truck as it's delivered. So that's how we were ensured that actually old truck is off the road.
It's a general life expectancy for use for these trucks.
It's like 7 to 10 years, something like that.
Any estimate of what the impact on NOx reductions would be?
Yeah, so they're certified to be 90% cleaner than the existing standard. So, but we found in our in-use emissions studies, the natural gas trucks are actually almost 6 times cleaner than diesel because of the duty cycles. So in low kind of creep mode, low load, diesel has a very high emissions, and that's where we found about 6 times higher than the natural gas offering. So we actually think it's probably better than 90% cleaner than the existing standard.
How do we go about educating the public about this transaction and the impact, and when these are going to be part of the fleet? Do we highlight that on social media, or just say that let people know about the great work in this case?
Yeah, we've been trying to do that, I guess, since the truck was commercialized. So we actually helped commercialize this 0.02 gram, 90% cleaner engine 2 years ago. And so we have done media blasts, we do outreach. Right now what we're trying to do is outreach to fleets to ensure that they know that these cleaner engines are available and they can take advantage of some of this incentive funding.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right, we haven't done kind of a global outreach where we really can applaud the work that these technology providers in bringing cleaner technologies to the region.
Well, we do it in limited circumstances.
We do it when there's a big program. For example, if we're going to make a big award, we would, our media folks would probably ask us to do a press release. We do it when there's big projects that are Volvo lights. We have a big project with the ARB to do zero emission Class 8 trucks. And so when there's events like that, then we highlight the work that we do. But probably could do a better job.
And some of the other items we're considering is putting on decals or stickers that recognize this as a clean truck funded by the South Coast AQMD. We're trying to finalize what that would look like. But that's one other way of communicating that message.
Well, just when they're delivered, it'd be great that there'd be a photo and a Facebook post and a tweet, or just something to get out to the general public so they are seeing that $14 million is a substantial amount.
Will they
At
all
least where I come from, it's a lot of money. So
We used to think
will
so
they all
too.
come out at the same time?
No, they'll probably place the order and then, they'll
They'll come out piece by piece. Yeah.
well, just whenever the first one comes out. I mean, I'm not saying every one of them, although I'll leave it to you all to determine what the best strategy is to highlight public education. I'm just asking if we can make sure that that happens one way or the other.
I think we could do more. I mean, these companies have a home base somewhere, right, where you could take one of our board members who's in that area and do a press release with that board member there. I think it would be good for the board member, good for the companies.
Yep.
So it's a nice approach to think about doing.
We will do that.
Okay, let me see.
Well, let me know when it goes out so I can retweet it.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole's really good at that. So.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none? We don't have a quorum, so we won't have any action taken on it, but it'll be forwarded to the board for consideration at the next board meeting. Okay, on agenda items 2 and 3, I'll make this announcement now. I do not have a financial interest, but I am required to disclose that I'm a member of the California Air Resources Board, and that agency is involved in both items 2 and 3. So we'll go with item 2 now, and we have Vicki White is here to give us a presentation, so go ahead, Vicki.
Thank you. Good afternoon. With this item, staff is seeking committee and board approval to adopt a resolution to recognize this year's Carl Moyer program funds, issue 2 program announcements, and transfer funds to continue with a truck replacement program for small fleets. It's a program we called the Voucher Incentive Program. For this year's Carl Moyer program, CARB has allocated a total of $36.2 million to the South Coast AQMD, of which about $34 million is in project funds and $2.2 million in administrative funds. And with our required local match of about $5.4 million, this comes to a total program funding of $41.6 million for this year's Carl Moyer program. To expend these funds, staff proposes to release 2 program announcements, one for the general Carl Moyer program, the second one for the surplus off-road opt-in NOx program. This program is intended to achieve additional NOx reductions from in-use off-road equipment. And in addition to these funds, staff anticipates the availability of other funds, including unused Moyer funds from previous years, accrued interest, AB 923 funds, as well as community air protection incentives, state reserve, and farmer funds, which allow projects submitted through the Carl Moyer program to be funded. A detailed assignment of these funds, including identification of each funding source, will be presented at the time of awards to the governing board, which is tentatively scheduled for October of this year. The next 2 slides cover the types of equipment and vehicle categories that are eligible through the Carl Moyer program. In the on-road heavy-duty vehicles category, it includes trucks, buses, refuse haulers, public fleet vehicles, as well as emergency vehicles. And in the off-road equipment category, it's a very diverse category, so it includes construction equipment, agricultural vehicles and tractors, locomotives, cargo handling equipment, as well as marine vessels. And the Carl Moyer program also provides funding for infrastructure, so these would be infrastructure projects that are needed to support zero and near zero emission heavy-duty vehicles and equipment. In the infrastructure category, we do prioritize projects that are located in disadvantaged and low-income communities, and we consider a variety of other factors, including whether or not the station provides public access, EV charging. We need to assure the site will be available for the term of the project, whether or not they're using renewable fuel source, and whether or not they have any fleet commitments to use the station, as well as cost share funds. The proposed schedule for these program announcements with board approval will release the program announcements on March 6th. They will stay open for 90 days. Starting in April, we're going to conduct a series of application workshops throughout our 4-county region. And once we close on June 2nd, it'll take us several months. We're always oversubscribed with applications for this program. So it takes quite a bit of staffing resources to evaluate everything. And they are competitively ranked based on cost effectiveness. And we plan to take the awards to the board in the October-November timeframe. And this action is to also transfer funds to continue the voucher incentive program. This is a streamlined program intended for small fleets with 10 trucks or less to replace their older diesel trucks with new, cleaner models. And just to give you some background, since 2009, the VIP has expended a total of $42 million for truck replacements. This includes over 1,200 replacements of older diesel trucks with new lower emitting vehicles, specifically for small fleets. So this action will involve transferring an additional $3 million to continue the VIP program here in the South Coast Air Basin. In summary, the recommended actions include adopt a resolution to recognize funds for this year's Carl Moyer program, issue program announcements for both the General Moyer program and the Soon provision, and transfer $3 million from the Carl Moyer program fund to continue truck replacements under the VIP program. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this?
No, just again, as the expenditures begin, I'm just interested in being able to educate, particularly the Orange County cities that I represent. And it's just very important that, Matt, if you can keep me posted as to once expenditures are occurring and pass along what we're doing. It's one thing to pass these, but once they're executed, I'd like to be able to let them know about the progress. So appreciate that.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Thanks, Vicki.
There is. From Drew Delaney. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Drew Delaney. I'm with Associates Environmental. In December, I came up here and asked that the program announcement this time include language that clearly spells out the priorities for the funding in the Carl Moyer and Soon programs this year. I'm happy to see that language was incorporated into the program announcement that spells out exactly how you guys want the funds dispersed to eligible projects. And I just want to say thank you for that language and the practices that will put that in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And this item is concluded. We will forward it on to the board. And we'll go with item 3, which is going to be presented by Ping?
Yes.
Wait.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Ping Gui, and this presentation will be on agenda item number 3, which is to recognize revenue transfer and appropriate funds for the VW program. To provide some general background, South Coast AQMD is project administrator for 2 of the category bins for the VW program, which is a statewide 10-year program. And the 2 categories administered by South Coast are the combustion freight and marine projects and the zero-emission Class 8 freight and port-rated trucks. The board originally recognized $150 million in total funds back in November of 2018 for administrative costs. However, the project agreement, which was later executed, was actually for a total of $165 million, for which was $150 million for project funds and $15 million for administrative costs. And as of November of 2019, South Coast AQMD received the first disbursement of funds, which was a total of $9.6 million. Staff proposes to recognize the additional $15 million in revenue, reimburse the fiscal year 18-19 salaries, benefits, and services and supplies transfer and appropriate funds for fiscal year 1920 and 2021's budget, and appropriate funds for future expenses into the annual budget. The recommended actions are to recognize an additional $15 million from CARB, reimburse expenditures, and to transfer and appropriate funds for the future budget. That actually concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
How is the money divided between the two projects, whether the drayage trucks versus the marine? Yeah, is it evenly divided, or can we
No.
just do it the way we want to?
No. Those costs were, actually, I'm going to let Ping describe it. Sorry.
Okay.
So for the different category bins, the 60 million went to combustion freight and 90 million went into the ZE Class 8 freight dray trucks. Of that, the first solicitation, which is currently open and will close on March 4th at 1 p.m., is only for $30 million. But what had happened is a total of $150 million, which was recognized back in November. There was actually 165 in the project agreement that was later executed.
But you might recall when ARB decided on how they would distribute the funds, there was a big fight about, where the majority of the funds should go. And we made the case that because they're accounting for almost all of the NOx reduction from the combustion category, and yet it's the smallest category, it's 60 million. So we really pushed for a larger disbursement for that category because there's technologies that are available now. But what your board at ARB adopted was to give Richard Corey, the executive officer, discretion to move some funds around if some categories are undersubscribed and other categories are oversubscribed. So what we're hoping to see is that there'll be, large number of applicants for the combustion, especially the near zero truck category, such that if there's other categories that are undersubscribed, they would move those funds over.
So let me just make a point of clarification. So as you know, Mayor, these are CARB funds, and we are administering statewide this program, which is unusual. That's not something that we usually do statewide. Usually it's just within our district. But the three large districts, us, Bay Area, AQMD, and San Joaquin, are in essence administering the program. That's why the administrative cost seems somewhat higher than what we normally do for costs. But because we're doing it statewide, there's additional costs that we have to incur to do that. So I wanted to make sure that we addressed the seemingly high administrative costs, but it's on a much broader area. And then also to remind that it's not just within the district, but it is the entire state.
So what happened was carved this up into different categories for each of the three districts to administer, and each district is administering the program statewide.
That's
I
right.
guess. And so this is what we got. San Joaquin got something else, and Bay Area got something else.
San Joaquin is doing school buses and
Shuttles.
Shuttle and
All
transit.
buses.
Yeah, and their total pot was,
130.
130.
and the Bay Area is doing,
Bay Area is doing
Zero emission
zero
off-road.
A 10
emission
million
marine.
light-duty vehicle infrastructure program. It could be, I think they're splitting the 10 million of 5 million for hydrogen and 5 million for electric charging. And then their other category is zero emission.
Zero emission marine, which actually consists of multiple items as well, such as like airport ground equipment, ZE for marine, as well as I think they have shore power and forklifts.
Okay.
So mainly
How much did
off-road.
Bay Area get?
Approximately, I think 70 million.
it was less than everybody else.
So they got 70, we got 150,
Jack.
and San Joaquin got how much?
130.
130. 150, 130, and 70.
Yeah, the concept between the exec officers when we discussed this was that we weren't, everybody tries to fight over the pot itself, but because we're managing it statewide, the concept was that, we have the largest need, we wanted to make sure that we got the largest access. But since they're open statewide, that means we compete with those others the same way that they compete with us. And we're relying on the goodwill of staff to make sure that everybody's being appropriately handled, and it's not just your home district.
So when we advertise for this, we had to advertise statewide.
Yes.
And have we gotten applications from outside our district?
Yes,
We have applications. We do have applications.
from within and throughout the state, actually.
But it's still open, so we'll know March 4th. is when
March
it
4th
closes.
closes.
Typically, the last 2 weeks is the greatest activity.
Okay. So if we don't spend it, we may have to give it to Bay Area.
No.
No.
We can
No.
actually open another
We'll spend it.
solicitation. We'll spend it.
So I'm wondering.
So to clarify, the 150 million, that could be spent outside of our district,
That's right.
Correct.
the applicants throughout the state.
That's
This
right.
is a statewide program.
And
It's rare, but we do that, but this is VW mitigation,
Mhm, yeah.
so.
So, what's the $15 million administrative?
So that's the administrative portion. We always get a portion of the grants to cover administrative costs. Typically, the
So that-
administrative,
What does that entail?
Inspections,
Website. yeah,
math
so-
inspections is going to be a big
Yeah,
piece
so
of
we have to
that.
have staff that, just like the other programs, they have to verify that the older truck is destroyed, that the new truck is delivered, has matching VIN numbers, that's a lot of staff work, but also processing of the contracts and the grants. So for each truck or piece of equipment or truck that is applied for and granted, we have to go through quite a bit of paperwork to ensure that it follows all the guidelines.
So staff time.
So staff
to
does.
implement.
And then also some hardware for our IM group to do the servers and data.
advertising,
Outreach,
Mm,
there's
yeah,
a lot of
outreach.
activity.
It's a 10-year program. So those funds will be spent over a 10-year period to implement the program.
Thank you for clarifying that, the timeframe. And so for the focus on scrap and replace for heavy-duty sector, on-road freight trucks, shuttle buses, school buses, forklifts, port cargo handling equipment, commercial marine vessels, freight switcher locomotives. How do we go about identifying those opportunities? So that take school buses. So is there opportunities for school bus in San Bernardino County to be, what would that be like?
So San Joaquin is the entity that.
You would
is
replace a school bus essentially?
Yeah.
Okay.
so the districts or the entity, the fleet, whoever it may be, we can put out general advertisements with regards to the availability of the funds. And then we get a number of responses to those. Generally, these are vastly oversubscribed. So if we have 150 million just in total, we would generally get 200 plus million in terms of requests. So staff evaluates all of those proposals. They look at a number of different criteria with regards to the engines. You have to verify all of that. They process it. Then once the engines were acquired, they have to monitor how much the engines have actually been run, the duration that they're running, are they actually getting those? And at any time during that entire process, if the conditions aren't being met, then staff comes back and adjusts the amount of the award accordingly. So if the engines aren't being run as much, or if the engines that they replace don't match the information that we have and we have to either downpower or upgrade, then we take that into account. But there's a tremendous amount of administrative oversight in these programs. And that's what the funds do. And the advertisement, how the fleets are managed, I would point to the mere fact that we have a tremendous oversubscription in terms of the effectiveness of getting the word out.
So again, just picking school buses for an example, would there be just a portion of these funds used and then the school district would pay 80-90%? Or what's the ratio of
The matching fund.
a matching
Actually,
kind
for
of
San
scenario?
Joaquin, that was the administrating agency for the school buses, they paid up to 100% of the electric school bus. So that category, as Mr. Nastri very eloquently described, was oversubscribed really rapidly. But the school districts had notice ahead of time that solicitation was going to open up. And so San Joaquin, under that solicitation, had it at a first come, first served voucher system. So there wasn't a cost effectiveness criteria that was laid out as is the case for the combustion category.
And that was based on VW, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So VW, the trust identified which categories would be competitive and which would be first come, first served. So in our case, in the combustion, it's competitive, so they'll be ranked.
Whereas school bus.
The school bus was first come,
Yeah,
first
Is
served.
it 100%?
Yeah, it would
For
be,
the school
for
buses?
school districts, it would be up to 100% towards the cost of a zero emission bus. But that category is already oversubscribed, they've closed it. In about 2 years, there's going to be another solicitation. Not all the funds were tied up in one single solicitation. The state wants to have multiple solicitations spaced maybe about 2 years apart. So 2 years from now, there'll be another one for school buses, for zero emission school buses.
And we've also done our own zero emission school bus
How many buses are we talking about
on the.
for school buses?
For VW or for
For
ours?
the program?
VW.
Yes.
100,
and so on.
yeah, about 100 buses in the first installment, and then another 100 2 years from now.
So it's a 10-year program. So over 10 years, 300 buses,
250 roughly.
how many?
250 roughly for the school bus category.
The back end of that 10-year period is strictly going to be monitoring, tracking. They have to sign a 3-year contract with us, and every year for 3 years give us an annual report so we can be assured those new buses are being operated. So that's more on the back end of the 10 years, but the first 6 years will be the solicitation spaced about 2 years apart.
Okay, I have a few other questions, Matt, we can talk offline.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, the item will get forwarded to the board for further consideration. And now we have the next item, which is item
The
4,
Clean Fuels Program.
the Office of Clean Fuels Program. And we have Justin Politi
Yes.
here to give it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Every year in our Clean Fuels Program, we have to submit an annual report to the state legislature, as well as update our plan for the upcoming year. We have in last October, we submitted to our tech committee here the plan update, the draft plan update. Next, we will, after this committee here is present this to the board, and following that, we will have to submit it to the legislature by the end of March. There are 2 advisory committee meetings that we convene to receive input for the program direction and project areas. Last year, we invited the ports to join our Tech Advanced Advisory Committee to get direct input from them and other stakeholders for these. We also attend meetings with other agencies within the state and federal government, as well as attend symposiums like the Expo and the DOE annual merit reviews. And then we partner with the California Fuel Cell Partnership, as well as the California Hydrogen Business Council. This is sort of an overview of our program. We take technologies from research, development, demonstration, deployment with the objective to commercialize clean fuel technologies. Most of our work is done in the development, demonstration, and deployment areas with the TRL level of 3 through 8. Here's the core technologies. The top 4 core technologies that we focus on are hydrogen fuel cell technologies, engine systems, as well as electric hybrid technologies, and fueling infrastructure and deployment. And then you follow with the other core areas that we focus on. These are our key funding partners, both ports of LA and Long Beach, as well as other state agencies, California Air Resource Board, the Energy Commission, and then utilities like SoCalGas, and also federal agencies like EPA and Department of Energy. Last year, we received about 20 million from those agencies, federal and state and local funding, that help us focus on battery electric excavators and wheel loaders, zero-emission delivery trucks, zero-emission trucks and EV infrastructure and such, as well as air filtration projects in schools and residences in the EJ communities. Approximately 3 million was recognized into clean fuels for battery electric shuttle bus replacement, Phoenix Motorcar project. The majority was recognized in other special revenue funds, supporting other clean fuels. Over the past year, we executed 72 contracts. You see the total project cost there was quite high. That is not a normal year. Last year, it's quite a banner year, actually. And that was because of one award was $45 million for our Volvo Lights project. And there were other large projects. And then our funding ratio is typically 1 to 4, where last year was like 1 to 14. Because of this influx of money from state and federal agencies. These are the key projects, like I mentioned, Volvo Lights, also some zero-emission cargo handling vehicles and equipment, battery electric shuttle bus, natural gas engine emissions and efficiency improvements, and also some stationary fuel cell projects, as well as station upgrade of the UCI hydrogen station.
Can I interrupt you a minute? Sure. I think it might be useful to describe in more detail the Volvo Lights project, because Carlos may not be familiar with it.
Sure. The Volvo Lights project is one of our biggest projects that we have going right now, and what their objective is to commercialize their electric platforms, electric vehicles for Class 8 trucks. The project is basically a zero emission from ship to the final customer, using zero emission drayage trucks to pick up the loads at the ports. They would take that to the warehouses, and the warehouses they would have cargo handling equipment like electric forklifts and yard trucks, electric yard trucks, to move the equipment and move the cargo around, load it onto smaller trucks, electric trucks, who would take it to the final customer. So the whole supply chain is done with zero emissions. And they even have solar on the warehouses. They will put solar on there to support the EV infrastructure.
And charging stations.
And the charging, right.
Yeah, so it's,
It also includes charging infrastructure.
and LIGHTS is actually an acronym developed by the Swedes, I think. It's low impact, green heavy transport systems.
Boy, can we remember that low
Yeah.
impact green
Heavy transport
This is
systems.
kind of not what we would typically say, but in any case,
That's English.
yeah, and that was really due to ARB for zero and near zero emission freight facilities proposal that they issued, and one of the hallmarks of that program, as well as one the year before from ARB, is it offered a substantial amount of funds to do these zero emission technologies, and that's the only way the large truck OEMs decided to come to the table. And so we're essentially paying for almost their full development program. We've been trying for over a decade to work with Daimler, the world's largest truck manufacturer, Volvo, the world's second largest truck manufacturer, and until we had the resources to really get them to get those approvals internally, they weren't willing to put the resources forth themselves. So it's a hallmark in these last few years that there were substantial funds offered by the state and by us to get the largest truck manufacturers then develop zero emission technology.
So for the Volvo Lights, I think it was 40 about 44 million or 45 million has gone into that project.
But, and that's only the grant. They're also putting up over half of that funds, of their own as well as the other partners.
Right, okay. But now we have Volvo and Daimler, are two big truck manufacturers that are kind of coming in with this and working with us now on heavy-duty truck projects. So took a long time to get there, but we're finally getting there. Yeah, very promising.
That's correct,
Okay.
and we have more planned.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. These are some of the key projects that we completed in 2019. They include a project for vehicle-to-grid electric school buses with the Torrance Unified School District, Odine plug-in hybrid electric Class 6 and 8 trucks, and then also an EPRI study on electrification. In the area of infrastructure and deployment, we funded and completed the Ontario CNG alt fuel station expansion, as well as the upgrade of a City of West Covina CNG station, and then also support for the RNG Center. In the area of mission control technologies, we completed a project with Southwest Research for the development and evaluation of after-treatment systems for large displacement diesel engines. This is what our distribution looks like between all the core areas that I mentioned earlier. And it's approximately 16 million that we plan to expend this year. And we just divide that up into the different core areas. There are some minor changes, and here you can see some of them compared to the last 2 years. One is because of, we just mentioned the Volvo and Daimler projects. Together, those two projects, just the funds from the South Coast was $18 million. So that was a big hit for us, and those two projects are going to be continuing on over the next couple of years. Also, we increased the amount of money in our stationary area because we feel that with the big push towards electrification that we need to support the EV infrastructure with microgrids. And so we're looking into that as a way to support that with self-generation, non-site generation. Also, in another area that we increased our amount of funding towards is onboard sensor development. And this is for onboard emissions monitoring, real-time emissions monitoring on the vehicle, as well as improved efficiency. As I indicated earlier, we've reviewed the draft plan with our tech committee and the draft plan annual report with the advisory groups. With the board's approval, staff plans to submit the report to the state legislature by the end of March. Every year, we look at our advisory committee groups, and occasionally we have some vacancies that occur throughout the year. Typically, our charter calls for approximately 12 technical experts, and they represent industry, academia, state agencies, and scientific communities, as well as environmental interests. Traditionally, there have been exactly 12 members on the committee. The charter also specifies member changes to this board have to be approved by this committee, by the technology committee.
So are these new people coming onto the committee?
Yes, these are new people. We have a USC professor, as well as to replace, we had a member from Honda Motors who's on, and we're going to replace him with another member, Steve Ellis, as well as a consultant, John Wall. He's former chief technology officer from Cummings. So he brings a lot to the to our committee and to our advisory, as well as in the area of healthcare, Michael Kleinman from UCI, and also Vic LaRosa, one of our partners, a fleet partner at TTSI. And then DWP just changed one of their members to George Pava.
only
Joe, I
have
just
the-
want to clarify, I believe that the membership for the Clean Fuels Advisory Group technically has to be approved by the board, the
Right,
governing
and
board.
the tech
But
advancement. is
that can
approved
be
by this
approved by the committee, but since we do not have a quorum, we're just going to forward that onto the governing board.
Okay.
the Tech Advancement Advisory Group, the list. This is a slate that we're putting
The new members.
new members in. UC Irvine, is that climate?
Yes.
And what are the other two?
TTSI is a name of a fleet, so they do a lot of the vehicle demonstrations for us. So it's a Class 8 drayage truck fleet located down at the Port of LA. And then DWP, that's the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. That previous representative retired, and so this is their recommended replacement.
TTSI has done a tremendous amount of work on the deployment of advanced technologies, particularly on natural gas. They were pretty instrumental in terms of getting their fleets out and providing the kind of feedback. They actually experienced a lot of challenges early on, but their experience helped inform and really improve subsequent generations. So he's very knowledgeable, he's been very engaged.
And the Honda Motors.
Yeah, so Steve Ellis is a longtime colleague of ours. The previous representative was Robert Bienenfeld. He retired this past January, so we're just replacing it with their recommended representative.
Michael Kleinman is a researcher at UCI. He's actually also a member, I believe, of the AB 617 consultative work group. They provide a lot of health-based information in terms of overall effectiveness. We actually have him on contract to provide support on an as-needed basis through planning.
Is he a medical doctor? Or engineer type or what?
Medical.
Medical.
And a professor, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Teachers at the university.
And we do have their CVs essentially attached to the letter.
Yes, we have the bios.
You had mentioned earlier that you were working with Volvo and
Daimler.
Daimler.
Freightliner.
Their reason that they're not part of this group is because you guys are working closely with them on other fronts, or?
Yeah, so this is the advisory groups meet twice a year and they help us kind of direct our program.
Okay.
We would probably get input from the technology providers independently. And so when we work with them on projects, we try to understand where their path forward is for commercialization. So this is just serving as an advisory body to our research program.
If you had a wish list to add to this, who would be missing? Who would you think we would want to pursue in the future?
Is this the entire group or is this
No,
just
this is
new
just
people?
replacement.
Just new
Yeah.
people.
Oh, it's just
Yeah.
replacements.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's 12.
Yeah, people not small. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll look at the other.
Okay.
I was not aware of that. I thought this was
It's in the
Yeah.
these are the replacements.
It's a
Okay.
pretty prestigious group.
Okay.
We're hard pressed to think of
Now
somebody on the
I'll
top.
Yeah. We include other state agencies.
withdraw my
like-
question.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question. We should probably think
Yeah.
about
It's in
that.
the appendix.
Just,
Appendix A,
I
she's
thought this was
telling
the
us.
scope of it. I'm like,
Okay.
gosh, there's more.
Yeah.
So, okay.
We have this huge package that's still over.
Somewhere in the reams here. Okay.
Nighttime reading.
Okay.
Okay.
Or sleep medication.
Okay, so the recommended actions are to approve our Clean Fuels Program annual report, as well as program update, adopt a resolution finding that we have no duplicate projects or programs funded by the Clean Fuels Fund. Also approve and adopt the Clean Fuels Advisory Group membership changes, and receive and file Technology Advancement Advisory Group membership changes. And then direct staff to forward the documents to the state legislature by March 31st.
Okay, so every year we have to look at this, that there's no duplication, but I know you go through a pretty rigorous process to make sure that there's no duplication.
Mhm.
Okay. And we'll just forward this on to the board, right? Is there any public comment on this item? Yes, we do have some. Okay, we have Ron G. George.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to make a comment on this. I appreciate the efforts of staff to put together this clean fuel report. I think it's a good report, essentially. I was myself worked in technology advancement office for over 20 years, so I'm familiar with most of the technologies listed here. But I'm deeply concerned that the Clean Fuel Advisory Committee is not diverse enough. It doesn't represent EJ communities, doesn't represent other voices who might be expressed concern about certain technologies being emphasized in this plan and in statewide generally. There seems to be a pronounced bias towards battery electric vehicles. I myself was involved in it. I was in the early part and I've really supported, but we don't, even though we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in pushing battery technologies, we aren't spending enough to address the battery waste problem that will come eventually. Even after use in the trucks, we get it into the home and one day we have to face these batteries have to be recycled. And can we recycle this cleanly? Can we not repeat the great mistakes we made with the lead acid battery recycling? This agency, particularly the legal staff here and the engineers, were very much involved in the Exide, Quetmerco, and GNB Quetmerco disaster. You know, the litigation of the litigation, maybe many of the board members here may not be familiar with it, but I'm sure the legal office have a good history of it. And it shows that just having one battery per car got to this point. And they have all closed down the facilities. And if you look at their footprint, their whole acres and acres of land has been highly polluted. So why are we acting like Rip Van Winkle, that 10 times more batteries per car? Let's say, just take a number, 30 million electric cars. We'll have 300 million batteries at some point to be disposed of. And can we do this cleanly? Can we not repeat some of the great mistakes we made with the lead acid battery? You know, there may be different types of contaminants, both in the air and solid. And who's going to face it? EJ communities. Most of us are from the middle class and rich class from here, so we don't address these solid waste issues coming up. Now, Mr. Naveen Berry and Mr. Nastri has said that there are some pilot projects small project going on to address this. But madam, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to raise the profile of this issue. Bring it now, we'll be able to resolve it. I'm sure, confident engineers and scientists are bright enough to address it and come up with a solution or address how to cycle. So I urge you to put more funding into studying this battery waste and not be, again, as I said, being like Rip Van Winkle, go to sleep and then come back 20 years to find this problem. So I urge you, and also urge you to put more money into hydrogen fuel cell project, which has far less impact ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And we have Andy
Abel.
Andy Abel.
Thank you. I have 3 points to make. First, I've suggested for pretty much every year for 20 years that the AQMD should release RFPs for their top 3 priorities that Joe presented. The staff typically likes to do sole source awards, which is fine, but I think you can cast a wider net and give taxpayers more bang for the buck with a competitive solicitation for your top priorities. In the document that was posted online, one of the projects that Joe highlighted was the microgrid demonstration. So that's a personal interest to me. About 10 years ago, I suggested to staff you look at integrating energy storage with EV charging using used EV batteries, second-use batteries. So I pulled up that page. On page 91, the title was "Develop and Demonstrate Microgrids with photovoltaic, fuel cell, battery storage, EV chargers, and energy management. The project description had to do with air-fuel ratio controllers and emission controls for engines and boilers. For a $1.3 million proposed project, that's kind of a problem to have such a big project and not have an appropriate project description. So I think that needs to be remedied, and also the rest of the document should be scrubbed as well if there's such a glaring error for such a big project.
That was page 91.
Page 91. The final thing has to do with the Clean Fuels Program in general. For several years now, I've been expressing concern to staff about using Clean Fuels Program funds for diesel engine research. The Clean Fuels Program legislation is very clear. Quoting from the Health and Safety Code, the program shall encourage projects that increase the utilization of clean burning fuels that reduce public health hazards from air pollution. Also, in a subsequent paragraph, it reads, in developing its program, the South Coast District shall consider promoting projects in transportation and stationary source sectors utilizing methanol fuel, fuel cells, liquid petroleum gas, natural gas, including compressed natural gas, combination fuels, synthetic fuels, electricity, including electric vehicles, and other clean burning fuels. Diesel and gasoline are specifically not included, so it's a concern that you're spending money doing that. I would suggest focusing on clean fuels and using the leverage of competition to get that done.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. All right, this matter will be forwarded to the board for consideration. And we now have item 5, which is recognize revenue amend contract for heavy-duty truck replacements, reimburse the general fund for administrative costs. And we have Phil Roca to give the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So this is another heavy-duty diesel truck replacement project that will be replacing older heavy-duty diesel trucks with the near-zero emission natural gas trucks. And in essence, what I'm going to be telling you is that what we're doing is we are receiving funds from the US EPA, from the JERA funds, and using those funds to supplant Prop 1B funds that have already been awarded to a contract. So as far as way of background, we applied and were awarded JERA funds in 2018. We subsequently went and revised that project scope to focus on non-drayage trucks. The revised award did not change the dollar amount, so the project again is to scrap older heavy-duty diesel trucks that are older than model year 2006 with new near-zero emission natural gas trucks. These trucks would have to be, the older trucks would have to be scrapped and demolished as required in the Prop 1B as well. And so we, in essence, looked to see what projects we might be able to apply these monies to, and we identified a project under Prop 1B. The entity is Ecology Auto Parts. They were awarded $4.7 million to replace 47 trucks. And just as was mentioned earlier, the Prop 1B solicitation is still open, so the intended result of this would basically to free up additional Prop 1B monies to apply to additional projects. So the proposal is, as stated, we asked to recognize the $1.6 million from the EPA to amend the ecology contract to supplant Prop 1B funds with DERA funds, maintain the award still at $100,000 per vehicle. There is some of the methodology about how the funds would be applied, but the bottom line is that it would be $100,000 per vehicle that would continue to be provided to replace the truck with ecology. And so the recommended actions are to recognize the revenue from the EPA, amend the contract with Ecology Auto Parts to add $1.5 million in DERA funds and reduce the Prop 1B funds by that same amount. And then the delta between the 1.6 and the 1.5 are for administrative costs that you see in the third bullet item at 99,444. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions on this item? Okay.
Great, thanks.
Is there any public comment on this item? No public comment, and this will be forwarded to the board for approval. And item number 6 is execute contract to conduct airborne measurements of NOx emissions in the South Coast Basin. And we have Sang-Mi Lee.
Slides, please. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Sang-Mi Lee. I'm a program supervisor in Planning and Rules Development Division. So this item is regarding an executing contract to conduct airborne flux measurement of NOx emissions in the South Coast Air Basin. So this graph illustrates the agency's NOx reduction goal in the future milestone years to attain federal air quality standard. This graph has been around for 4 years. I'm sure many people have been seeing this one. But then this agenda item is taking your attention to the analysis behind this graph. How did we got this one? So to come up with this 45% or 55% NOx reduction goal, we employed this comprehensive numerical model, chemical transport model, utilized it for over 100,000 computer hours, utilizing 1,000 different CPUs together, and then come up with the ozone and PM 2.5 concentration, and then guide this the NOx reduction goal to attain future air quality standard. Two major input of this whole process are the meteorology and emissions. And as discussed in this earlier today Mobile Source Committee meeting, these two factors are very important to come with the accurate estimate of where we stand in the future of planning purposes and strategy development. Meteorological part has been currently under study by a separate contractor. The agency is funding to a group of academic group to study meteorological impact on the air basin's recent air quality. Emission part is another big part that poses lots of uncertainties, and this specific item is actually regarding the emission component of it. So undebatably, emission is very important part of this planning and then the planning. But during the development of this last 2016 AQMD development, the challenges on the accuracy of emissions inventory and the modeling approach has been raised by stakeholders, especially groups like Engine Manufacturers Association, challenged us in various ways, and they're still challenging us using different venues. But then acknowledging that, so emissions coming from various sectors, as illustrated here, trucks and then consumer products, and especially even this vegetations, trees, lawns, and golf courses emit NOx and VOCs, which are precursor to ozone and PM 2.5. So some categories have been better understood and then better studied, but then some categories like urban biogenics or these days consumer products, kind of like hairsprays and the deodorants type of things have been kind of less understood. But all of this poses uncertainties in emissions inventory. So with this regard, so there is a need to improve emissions inventory or even validate that we are where we are at in terms of emissions inventory. And then there is a proposal by University of California, Berkeley, to conduct the measurement of NOx and VOC emissions utilizing aircraft. As illustrated in this slide, this aircraft is owned by neighbor postgraduate school, Twin Otter, and this UC Berkeley group proposed to have instruments to measure NOx and VOC instantly on real-time basis during the flight. They propose to conduct 8 flights and 40 airborne hours in total and deployed over South Coast Air Basin. And then this measurement would assist to come up with a more accurate inventory of NOx and VOCs in the basin. Especially agency is planning the next round of AQMP, which is 2022, and the data expected to collect during these experiments will assist the development of next AQMP strategy. And here, the next slide is cost part of the experiments. So this experiment has two parts. One is VOC measurement part. CARB is committed to fund $700,000 to cover VOC measurement component. And then the other component, next, NOx measurement component, is requested to us to fund $300,000. So total cost of the project is $1 million. So the steps recommendation is execute this contract with the resident of the University of California on behalf of its Berkeley campus in the amount of $300,000 from Clean Fuels Program Fund. This concludes this item presentation, and happy to answer any question.
Thank you. I have one question that kind of jumped out was that vegetation may affect VOCs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because, a lot of people are saying, let's go out and plant a lot of trees to reduce the carbon impacts. So we've got two things working against each other here. So what do you have to say about that?
Okay, so vegetation or we call biogenic emissions because the trees actually emit the hydrocarbons, which is kind of VOC component. And then it's known that the trees, like in the mountains in the San Bernardino, the mountainous ranges, do have the VOC emissions coming from trees. And then that does contribute ozone formation. But then, as you mentioned, the trees kind of, the carbon reduction purposes, trees do help. However, what we need to be mindful is when we are planting trees, there should be low VOC emitting species. So, and then especially these days, especially up until now, when you are talking about the VOC emissions from vegetation, the mind was usually the mountain areas that's far downwind, over high in the mountains. However, more and more, the focus is given to this really, even if it's low, the emissions happening near urban area or urban fringe area. For example, like lawns and then golf courses, and then even these street trees. Even if the amount of emission associated with such areas much smaller than this big gigantic pine trees happening in the San Gabriel or San Bernardino mountains, because of the location of it, it still contributes to urban ozone substantially. So when we were doing the tree planting project, like 6-7 years ago, the criteria I do recall, our two criteria was one, low VOC emitting species, and second was native species, native to the South Coast Basin. So those two were the criteria for the selecting plants.
It'd be good to get that low VOC species out there. So when we start talking about tree planting, people are planting the right things. We have a list somewhere, right?
So each cities actually have, and not each, many cities have their tree inventory data. And then currently the staff working with the cities and then the local governments to identify the trees that are planted in the cities and then estimating the associated VOC emissions associated with it. So we are working on that to make sure.
A lot of the native vegetation is, for us, fairly low VOC. I think where you see a lot of the high emitting is actually more on the East Coast, in the pine forests and south. But what you're seeing is that as the challenge becomes more difficult for us to get those NOx reductions, you're also seeing a lot of various statements being made, well, you're never going to get there because of biogenic sources, or you're not going to do this because of that. We look at that whole range, but as Dr. Lee was explaining, people are raising those uncertainties. We want to be able to address those uncertainties and sort of definitively state that's really not an issue. Or conversely, if we learn that it is, then we'll do that. We'll take care of it. But again, based on the work that we've done, we're pretty confident.
Then what we're doing with this aerial system is measuring ambient air quality, is that right? Okay, and we think it's a more accurate, that we'll get more accurate inventory from this?
The reason is, so like one of the questions raised during this morning's Mobile Resource Committee is, so emissions are going down. That's how the regulatory inventory shows. And then those inventories were developed based on so-called top-down approaches, meaning that the county total consumption of, let's say, paintings or coatings, or county total number of vehicles and number of vehicle miles traveled. Even though we think our data, inventory data are the state of art, so the question often raised whether the trends or what we claim where we are at with emissions are really what's happening out there. And then also another point is, as we mentioned in this slide, so there are various the emission sources. We're going source by source and how much they are each sources emits. But this study would measure the entire concentration or change of the concentration coming from every sectors within the basin. So that will set the tone of how much actually coming out, how much is instead of, let me take it, how much VOCs or NOx is coming out of entire basin in comparison to a specific monitoring station or specific category that the traditional ground-based monitoring covers, since this one is covering the entire basin with continuous measurement.
Okay, great, thank you. Carlos, do you have any questions?
The deliverable that'll come from this, will it be in a form similar to, well, how would it contribute to the last meeting we had on mobile and had the much talked about map with the bullseye?
Yes.
Will we have data that will enhance that type of mapping? Just trying to figure out what's the deliverable from this.
So
how would it complement that?
So eventually, and yeah, short answer is yes, but then longer answer is to address the bullseye, the phenomena. So the reduction of entire basin scale is needed, and then this study would guide how much of reduction is actually needed, and then which component would be the most efficient way to reduce emissions, given the different reactivity of the species and the sources.
It'll be help us understand what would be the best techniques or mitigation measures moving forward.
I think it would help us validate the existing modeling and plans that we have within our AQMD, and would also provide us with additional information for the fine-tuning of such plan. And as you know, we're currently just starting in our next AQMP.
Okay, so it will inform our next AQMD.
Yes.
Okay. When will this be available to us? When will the data be available?
So we are proposing this item to go to the March board, but then ARBs plan to go the summer or even late summer. So then the measurement will be summer of next year. So let's say end of 2021, the data will be wrapped up, and then should assist us to the next 2022 AQMP.
Was the ARB action approval of this for funding, or I missed that?
ARB is committed to fund the $700,000, but then it has not gone to their board yet. It's a step level, the plan to fund the project.
Well, I hope we can count on someone to put it together.
You're looking at me. Yeah. Okay.
And then one last question for the, is there that point about trees contributing to VOC and to identify low VOC emitting and native to our basin as far as tree planting? Is there a list of BMPs of best management practices that we could pass along to cities who would be planting trees throughout the entire, we have 34 cities in Orange County, we have 24 cities in San Bernardino County, and so on. So is there a way that we can
We have
have a
list.
memo or
Sure.
something,
Yeah, so
I
when we did
would
our,
like to, at least from an Orange County perspective, present the cities and say,
Mhm.
you know, FYI, did you know that you could be contributing to ozone? So here's a list of, next time you're looking to do tree planting in your city, these would be the ones you best
Sure.
consider.
yeah,
So that's
when we
something we
did
could
our,
have as an action item, just
yeah,
to,
absolutely. When we did our tree planting programs, I don't know,
More than 5 years ago?
we had developed that list. And so we just had to dig it out, make sure it's accurate.
for each of the counties, I don't know if it would be different, but if so, then maybe
think
there's
we
a
just have
nuanced
a-
adjustment from,
Sure. We can look
for
at
each
that.
of the governing board members. That would be
I think that's
something.
a good idea. I mean, my city keeps a list of approved trees, and maybe there's some on there that we shouldn't be planting, so I think it'd be good to have that information go out to cities and counties. Have.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And is there any public comment on that item? Seeing none? That'll be forwarded to the board. Is there any other business to come before the committee? Seeing none? Is there any general public comment on an item that isn't on the agenda? Seeing none? This meeting will be adjourned until next time, which is March 20th.